At first, it looked like an almost unimaginable road tragedy. 5 teenage boys were dead. 3 women and a young child were seriously injured. 2 cars had collided head-on on a motorway in County Kildare. But as investigators began looking at what happened before that collision, the story changed. Because according to reports, this did not begin on the motorway. It began hours earlier. And what the guards now believe happened before the crash has become one of the most disturbing parts of the entire case. In the early hours of Sunday morning, 3 sisters and a 7-year-old boy were traveling toward Dublin Airport. They were heading to Britain for a family wedding. There was nothing unusual about their journey. Their Hyundai was traveling in the correct direction on the motorway. Inside were 2 sisters in the front, their younger sister in the back, and her young nephew beside her. They had no idea that somewhere ahead of them, another car was traveling directly toward oncoming traffic. Inside that second car were 5 teenage boys. And they were driving the wrong way down the motorway. What happened next was catastrophic. Near morning County Kildare, the 2 vehicles collided head-on. All 5 teenagers in the black car were killed. The 3 women and the child in the Hyundai survived, but all 4 suffered serious injuries. For emergency workers arriving at the scene, the destruction was so severe that initially investigators believed there were 4 people dead inside the teenagers' vehicle. Only later, after the wreckage was moved, was a 5th person discovered. 5 teenagers. All dead. But almost immediately, investigators began asking another question. What had happened before they reached the motorway? Because the journey did not appear to have started there. According to reporting from the Irish Times, guards had received reports earlier that night about males believed to be teenagers trying to break into houses and cars parked outside homes in Athy. Investigators believe the people reported in Athy were the same group who later died in the motorway collision. That is an allegation based on the Garda investigation. It has not been established in court. But it changed the direction of the story completely. Because investigators were now trying to reconstruct not only a fatal crash, but the events leading up to it. At around 2 o'clock that morning, a Garda patrol encountered the black car in Athy. The driver was asked to stop. According to the reporting, the car instead sped away. Then came a decision that would eventually place the vehicle on one of the most dangerous routes imaginable. The wrong side of a motorway. The car traveled into oncoming traffic. But what happened next makes the sequence even more difficult to understand. According to investigators, this was not simply one accidental wrong turn. During an earlier period of wrong-way driving, the car turned around and left the motorway. It entered a service station in the Kildare area. At that point, the occupants were no longer trapped on the wrong carriageway. They had reached a place where the direction of travel could have changed. But according to the investigation reported by the Irish Times, the car turned again. And then it went back onto the motorway, once more heading south on the northbound carriageway, directly against traffic. By then, guards in the area were aware of what was happening. A plan was being prepared away from the motorway. Devices designed to puncture the tires of a vehicle had been positioned around an exit near Moon. The idea was to stop the car if it came off the motorway, but it never reached that point. The black car continued down the motorway, and somewhere ahead were 3 sisters and a little boy heading for an airport and a family wedding. They were traveling normally. They were traveling legally. And then a car appeared in front of them, coming the wrong way. The collision followed. There is another detail investigators discovered afterward. The teenagers in the black car were wearing balaclavas or were otherwise masked when they died. That fact, combined with the reports from Athy earlier that night, became part of the Garda investigation into what the group had allegedly been doing before the crash. But another detail also changed. Early reports described the car as stolen. That is no longer the latest Garda belief. Because the vehicle was not registered to any of the teenagers or their relatives, investigators initially suspected it had been stolen. But further investigation reportedly found another explanation. Guards now believe the car had changed hands earlier in the month for a small amount of money, while the official registration details had never been updated. So the latest information is important. The car is no longer believed by investigators to have been stolen. But that still leaves the question of why it was driven in such an extraordinary and dangerous way. Guards believe the driver entered the wrong side of the motorway while attempting to evade them. And there is another crucial detail. The black car was not being pursued by guards when the fatal collision happened. That distinction matters. Investigators believe the driver may have known that Garda patrol cars would not follow a vehicle traveling against motorway traffic because doing so could put even more innocent drivers at risk. The crash has now opened a much wider debate inside Ireland about exactly what guards are supposed to do when a driver refuses to stop. Because chasing a vehicle can create enormous danger, but refusing to chase it can allow the vehicle to continue. And this case has exposed just how impossible that decision can become. Following the crash, calls grew for better pursuit training. The Minister for Justice said guards would receive the resources required to deal with dangerous driving and that work was underway on stronger legal protections for officers involved in pursuits. But another part of the investigation has attracted just as much attention. Social media. Garda Commissioner Justin Kelly spoke publicly after the collision about the wider phenomenon of people deliberately driving the wrong way on motorways and roads. He said that in some cases, people carry out this kind of behavior for attention and social media likes. But there is an important distinction here. There is no verified evidence in the reporting reviewed for this story that this particular fatal journey was being live-streamed. And the commissioner did not say that these 5 teenagers were definitely driving the wrong way simply to gain social media attention. He was talking about a broader pattern. Still, social media has become part of the investigation surrounding the case. According to reporting, accounts belonging to some of the teenagers contained footage involving car thefts and attempts to evade Garda vehicles during high-speed driving. TikTok said it removed, flagged material and banned accounts that violated its rules against criminal behavior. Ireland's media regulator has also contacted TikTok about dangerous driving content connected with the wider controversy. That has created another uncomfortable question. What happens when dangerous behavior becomes entertainment? Videos involving stolen cars, high-speed driving, and attempts to escape the guards have circulated online in Ireland. For viewers, a video can last seconds. Swipe. Watch. Share. Move on. But on a real motorway, there is no swipe to the next video. There are families driving home. Parents taking children somewhere. People going to work. And in this case, 3 sisters and a 7-year-old boy simply trying to reach an airport for a wedding. Now 5 teenagers are dead. 4 innocent people were left seriously injured. Families on both sides have been devastated. And investigators are still reconstructing the chain of decisions that led from Athy to that motorway. Because this case is no longer only about the moment 2 vehicles collided. It is about everything that came before it. The reports of attempted break-ins. The Garda request for the car to stop. The decision to drive away. The first journey against motorway traffic. The moment the car came off the motorway, they stopped at the service station, and then the decision to enter the motorway in the wrong direction again. Every one of those moments is now part of the bigger picture investigators are examining. The independent policing watchdog, Fire-Through, is also investigating because there had been Garda contact with the vehicle before the deaths. That referral does not mean any Garda officer has been accused of wrongdoing. It is an independent investigation designed to establish exactly what happened when a death or serious injury occurs around the time of contact with the guards. And that distinction is important too. There are already strong opinions surrounding this case, but there are also facts that have changed as investigators learn more. The car was initially suspected of being stolen. Now, guards believe it had been bought. There are allegations about activity in Athy. Those remain allegations. There's discussion about dangerous driving videos online. But there is no verified evidence that the fatal journey itself was being live-streamed. And although guards had tried to stop the car earlier, investigators say there was no Garda pursuit taking place at the moment of the collision. Those details matter, because behind all of the anger, speculation, and arguments online, there are 9 people at the center of what happened that morning. 5 who never came home, and 4 who were simply traveling to a family wedding when another vehicle appeared directly in their path. The final seconds on that motorway were horrific, but investigators are now looking much further back than those final seconds. Because the biggest question surrounding this tragedy is no longer just how the crash happened. It is how everything reached that point. And what happened in the hours before 5 teenagers entered that motorway for the final time.